All right, how's it going? I'm going to show you how we're going to make our first brisket on a pellet grill Traeger. So to start off, we've got this nice 15.5 pound brisket, and we're going to start by trimming it up. We're going to start by getting rid of all this hard fat up here on this top side. It's not going to render down at all during the cook, so we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to save all of these big chunks, cut them up into pieces later so that we can put them in an aluminum pan and throw it in with the brisket so that it'll render down into some tallow that we'll be able to use. You'll see that a little later here during this cook, but I'm going to start off by trimming out all this. All right, so we got most of this big hard fat out of here. Now we're going to just start by trimming off some of this extra fat over the top. Just going to get rid of that. I'm going to throw all this into this big pan. And you don't have to get all of it because some of it will be nice to render down into the meat during the cook, but most of this top fat isn't exactly what you want because the marbling inside is what's really going to get that meat nice and juicy. Get this little last piece here. All right. Just clean it up a bit. Okay. Now that most of this is off the top, there's a little meat in here too. If you get a big chunk of meat, you can save that and grind it up and make hamburgers or whatever else you want with that ground beef, but it's good to save that. So now we're gonna flip this over. I'm gonna trim this. There's a brown piece. So you can see that that's a pretty thick piece. That's not gonna render down. You want about 1/4 inch all the way around, and you'll see that better when we turn it over, but this is another one you just wanna slice up and throw into this pan. So that's off the point. We're gonna wanna save some more of the fat over here on this point end because that's where most of the marbling comes from, and that's the fattier side compared to the flat. We're gonna wanna take most of that off, but you'll be able to see that once we turn this bad boy over. So here you can see we've got fat all the way around, fat on this whole back side. And if flip it like this, you can see that there's a good amount of fat. You can see this kind of gray meat. We're gonna get rid of that, trim it all the way down here. And then we're gonna take it down to 1/4 inch on this back side. So I'll talk to you in a second after we get that done. All right, now that we got this all trimmed up, it's time to season it. And today we're gonna be using a mustard bind with a homemade rub. You can use whatever kind of rub you like, but we're gonna get started with this mustard and just give it a little drizzle on each side. And then just rub that in. And the purpose of this mustard is to kind of just give it a layer where the meat will have something for the seasoning to bind to. So when you sprinkle the seasoning over the top, it'll stick to this better than it would just the meat. You don't have to do this, but we're gonna try it out today. So just give it a nice little coating. None of this mustard flavor will go into the meat. It's just used as a binder. And then, so on the trim, we got a little aggressive, and you can see that there's a couple pieces here where the meat, we cut it a little thin. We want 1/4 inch, and obviously there's not 1/4 inch here, and there's not 1/4 inch here. So one of the great things about saving this fat is you can take it and kind of just stick it right in there. And that'll hold up. You can do that same here. Got 1/4 inch slices. And you can see that we harvested a lot of fat off this brisket, so that'll come in handy later on. if that'll be enough. Get it all over. All right. So now that that bind is on both sides and rubbed in, evened out. All right, so we got this binder. The mustard is all over. It's spread thin. And we're going to start out with this coarse black pepper. The coarse black pepper is the best because it'll bind to this meat and give it a nice bark after it's in the smoker. So we're going to start out by just giving it a nice high seasoning layer all over so it distributes evenly. All right, we're just going to give that a quick pat in. We're going to flip it over. Actually, we're going to go with, and we're going to fill in the gaps with our other mixture. You can use whatever kind of mixture you want. This is just it's a finer ground rub, so salt, onion powder, garlic powder, and a couple other things, a little cayenne pepper, just to give it a little more flavor. And this finer rub is better to come in with secondly because it kind of fills in the gaps between that coarse black pepper. So you can see we've got pretty nice coating here. You want to make sure you get all parts. A little aggressive on that. All right, side's looking good. Let me flip it over. And it looks like we lost our fat piece here. Once again, we're going to start off with this pepper. Rub it in, make sure we get the sides too. Probably should have done this outside, kind of making a mess.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, that's pretty good for this back side. And we're coming in, make even more of a mess. Pat that in really nicely. Make sure it's on all the edges. Just finish it a little up top. All right. Looks pretty good. Looks like it's seasoned well. So now we're going to take this bad boy. We're going to set it in a big aluminum pan. And we've got a little wire rack to set on the bottom so that when we put it in there and we put it in the fridge, it's not going to get soggy when it's just sitting on the bottom. So we're going to take this. You can do either side, fat side up or meat side up, and just place it in here. We're going to give that just like that. We're going to cover it in aluminum foil, and then we're going to throw it in the fridge for the night to rest before we throw it on the smoker in the morning. So we'll see you then. So it's currently 2 a.m. We're ready to pull out our brisket from the fridge because we're going to throw it on the smoker in an hour. And so we want to let it get out of the fridge and just rest, come up to room temperature before it goes right onto that hot smoker. So here we go. You can see it's darker, it's more moist. That dry brine with that rub sitting overnight has worked really well, and this should be really moist throughout the whole smoke process due to that. So we're gonna let it sit for an hour, and then 15 minutes before that hour ends, we're gonna heat up the grill, get it running, and then we're gonna throw this bad boy on. All right, it's 3 a.m. We've got the brisket on the Traeger. We're going fat side up. And we've got a little bowl of fat there. You can see we got it set to 180. We're just gonna let that roll. All right, so it's about 12:15. This brisket has been going nice, and check that internal temperature. We're running a little over 160, which is perfect. The flat 162.5. Let's see over here. Got about 160 as well. So it's time to take this bad boy off the smoker, and we're gonna wrap it up with foil. Use a little tallow. 1 second, here we go. Right, today we're gonna be wrapping with aluminum foil. We've got 2 strips of heavy duty, heavy strength aluminum foil laid out. We've got our tallow right here, which is from those melted pieces of fat that we poured into this jar and threw it in the fridge so that it would solidify. And we're gonna take a couple scoops of that, place it down on this foil before we throw the brisket on it, just so it's got a little extra fat to moisten it up while it's wrapped and during the last couple hours of the cook. So I'm gonna get that laid out, and then I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so we've got the brisket out. You can see that nice bark is forming after about 9 hours and 15 minutes. We've got it set on the tin foil, and you can see that tallow is already starting to melt down. So we're gonna wrap this up real tight, and then we've got a little extra here that's been in the smoker. I'm just gonna pour that over the top right before I finish the wrap. So let's get it all wrapped up nice and tight. Brisket is wrapped nice and tight. We don't want any air pockets in there because that will allow the bark to steam and lose its crunch. So we're gonna take it, throw it back on here. We've got it set to 250. It's on its way up. We're just gonna throw it in at 250 until the internal temperature reaches about 200 degrees, and then we'll reevaluate at that point. All right, the brisket has reached 200 degrees inside. So we're gonna throw it in this cooler, wrap it with a towel, just throw a towel on the top, and let it sit for a couple hours until we're ready to serve. All right, here we are 13 hours later. The brisket is finished. Let's cut into it and see how it looks. And she's juicing. Look at all that juice. Looking good.